Hi there, BookTube. Well, in December, I happened to read two books that could be described as murder mysteries. But I have to say that they're kind of like at the opposite ends of the kind of spectrum of books that you could describe as a murder mystery. Okay, because one of them is The Brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoyevsky, published 1880, and the other was An Heir to Murder by Charles Heathcote, published in 2020. And Charlie, is a fellow booktuber of ours, and Heir to Murder is a what you'd call a cosy murder mystery, um, and a lot of fun. The Brothers Karamazov. Well, now, Dostoevsky is one of the big beasts, isn't he, of 19th century Russian literature. And it's a big, chunky, intense Russian 19th century novel. But whereas Charlie definitely explicitly set out to write a murder mystery, Dostoevsky also essentially is writing a murder mystery in this book, but that obviously wasn't what he set out to do because such genre didn't exist then. But yeah, having said that, that is essentially what the book is. Now, I hope that oh, and why was I reading The Brothers Karamazov in December? That's what I should say at this point. Why was I reading Heir to Murder? I was reading Heir to Murder because I made a commitment to have a kind of a genre reading Christmas and New Year holiday this year, and so doing a cozy mystery fitted nicely with that. I was reading The Brothers Karamazov in December because Matthew of Maybury Book Club decided to do it as like a kind of a read along, and that pushed me to pick up something that I think I'd been a bit put off by, although I really enjoyed reading Crime and Punishment. It's heavy, long, yeah, and I thought it might be heavy going, shall we say. But Matthew kind of prompted me to throw myself into it. So that's why I was reading these two books, and I really, really hope that neither Charlie nor Matthew will be too horrified at me talking about the two of them in one video, because they are both murder mysteries, and I realised as I was reading them both that there were sort of components of similarity, even though they're at opposite ends of this spectrum, if that makes sense, I think. And in effect, what Dostoevsky did without realizing it was establish some of the essential elements that murder mysteries need to succeed, and that people have been using ever since. So let's have a little think about what some of those are, and how they are in both books. Atmosphere is very important in a successful murder mystery, isn't it? And now in Heir to Murder, it's set in a village, so that's like a closed community, which is always often good for a murder story, isn't it? Everyone knows each other's business. It's kind of quite gossipy. There are tensions, but because he's setting out to do your cozy style, you also get, along with the corpses, you get tea shops, gardens, baking, that sort of thing. Dostoevsky, again, Brothers Karamazov, set in a village, closed community. It's fascinating because that works so well with any murder story, and as if he kind of knew, everyone knows each other's business, and they all gossip about each other a lot and speculate about each other, and there are lots of tensions. But he's also wanting to talk about, rather than baking and gardens and tea shops, religion and politics and all that 19th century Russian stuff. Now, an element in the atmosphere of both books is quite a bit of humour. Now, you expect humour in a cosy mystery, the sort of Miss Marple style, of detective story. You, I didn't necessarily expect the amount of humour that there was in the Brothers Karamazov. I think because I'd read Crime and Punishment before, and that doesn't have so much. And there were a lot of funny scenes, funny characters, funny moments that really kind of lifted the story. Or in the same way that Shakespeare uses kind of like funny scenes in his tragedies to kind of like break the you build the intensity and then you kind of break it with a funny scene and then you can build it again. So yeah, he does that. Now, violence and heavy drinking is and kind of melodramatic behaviour is pretty much what you expect in a 19th century Russian novel, isn't it? That's yeah, it's your kind of um uh, yes, what you imagine, and perhaps it really was like that. I suppose it must have been. Yeah, I mean, they're still heavy drinkers, aren't they, in Russia? I did not necessarily expect in the cosy Miss Marpley mystery book from Charlie quite how much violence and heavy drinking there would be. I'll tell you what, the heroine of his book, she can really put away her bottles of Pinot Grigio, that's for sure. And I think she assaults about 4 different people in the course of the book. Um, and she's meant to be the good guy. But yeah, so violence in both. Now, next thing that you definitely need in a murder mystery is motive. You've got to create some sense of motive for the murder, haven't you? And what are the classic reasons for murder, both in real life and in books? It's got to be family relationships, romantic relationships, family loyalties, yeah, and money. And Charlie uses all of those apart from money, I would say, and Dostoevsky uses a whole lot, and very effectively too. Um, yeah, and yeah, that's no surprise, I suppose, except that as I say, because he didn't kind of know he was writing a murder mystery. It's interesting that he really does kind of go into motive so actively. Now, um, it's in order for motives to work, you need characters, don't you? And they've got to be convincing enough for the motivation to make some sense, which is true in both books, I think. You've got to have a big enough cast that you've got more than one possible culprit if you're going to have the whodunit element. You need your reader to attach to them enough that when you introduce elements of jeopardy, perhaps, that that matters. That you get the bit of emotion. I think in a cozy mystery, you don't need the characters to be enormously realistic, and I don't think that was I suppose you know Charlie writes good characters, but they're not kind of like enormously sort of deep and well rounded. What you can see clearly is that he's setting up his sort of oddball detective couple for a series, and good on him. It's going to work, I think. Um, that means that then those characters have plot armor because they're going to appear in future books. You can kind of tell that it's moving towards that. Whereas Dostoevsky had a much freer hand, I suppose, and but he equally was looking to his characters to um, kind of achieve certain things that he wanted to achieve in the book. I'm not putting that very well. So you take the 3 main characters, the brothers, and uh, he almost sets them up as archetypes of particular, almost like facets of Russian um, character. So the eldest one is really driven by emotion. Yeah, yes, and sort of risky, dramatic behaviour and love, and yeah. Second brother, intellectual, political, more tensions about should Russia model itself more on Europe or be stay true to its sort of Russian heritage and difference. Yeah, bit not exactly an anarchist, but sort of slightly. Yeah, you know what I'm describing, I think. Third brother is the one that we attach to most. He's a lovely character, Elisha, and but he is the spiritual one, the religious one, and it's clear through the book, particularly by the end of the book, that's where Dostoevsky feels Russia's best future lies, in holding on to those spiritual values. So, in a sense, he's using those characters as archetypes, but they're also very real for us. There's a lot of other delightful, interesting characters in the book, but there are others that are kind of slightly like there as plot devices to an extent. And again, that's something that just happens in murder mysteries. You need things to work out in a certain way, so you need certain characters to do certain things that may not perhaps completely make sense. And I do see that equally in Heir to Murder. It's almost like a sort of occupational hazard of a murder mystery, I think. Which, of course, brings us to plot, which is essential. And the kind of key thing, I suppose, in a murder plot is the timing of the murder, and how you kind of flag that it's going to happen, and the build up, and how much sort of setup do you do, and how quickly do you make it happen. And Charlie's made some very careful choices there. You can see it's well planned and it works, and you have a nice sort of it's well flagged, and yet when it happens, the finding of the corpse is a surprise. So yeah, spot on. You and then you introduce clues, don't you, to the identity of the murderer. And yes, Charlie does the classic thing of putting those clues there, but not so obviously that you kind of get it too soon. But when you get to the end, you look back and you think, oh, I should have noticed that. I should have thought of that. Yeah, it's what Agatha Christie does so well, yeah. Dostoevsky, well, he didn't know he was writing a murder mystery, did he? Because the genre didn't exist. But he's extraordinarily clever in planning when things happen and when he reveals things across the course of the novel. We go through, he tells us right at the beginning that there is going to be a murder, but not who is going to be murdered. But you kind of, he then flags up who it is that's going to be murdered. But he keeps you waiting. He keeps you waiting for the actual murder longer than you might have expected, and then when it happens, you don't even know that it's happened until after it's happened. Although you're kind of there. Yeah, good stuff. And then he does some very clever choosing about when to reveal things, bits of information thereafter, so that you're left uncertain, speculating about who done it, which is absolutely what you want, isn't it? You don't want it. I know there's the how done it or the why done it version of murder mysteries that you get now, but the best kind of who done it, you don't want to know too soon, and you don't want it all just handed on a plate. So, two very different books. You can tell that I really enjoyed both of them in their different ways. Heir to Murder, if you're a kind of cozy mystery reader, I wouldn't hesitate to say read Charlie's book and enjoy it, and you'll be supporting another booktuber, which is lovely. Brothers Karamazov, or Karamazov Brothers, depending on which translation you're reading. If you have thought that it might be a bit heavy and a bit off-putting, it's much more readable than you might expect. It is long, but it's a real page turner, and if you want to understand it in a more sort of insightful and literary sort of way, go to Matthew's channel, Maybury Book Club, and see the really good. He will carry you through the book with his lovely videos.